Welcome back, everyone. My name is Patrick. You're watching the Oilers Rundown. Well, it was nice to see the boys finally pick up a win here, 4-0 over the Pittsburgh Penguins. Strong effort from Calvin Pickard. With all that said, was going through the comments post-game here, and a comment from yesterday got me thinking this would be a good idea for a video. The idea for the video came from Makush. This was his comment here. He was suggesting taking a look at the Edmonton Oilers post-trade deadline from last year and post-trade deadline from this year, comparing the rosters, seeing which one was better going into the Stanley Cup playoffs. So for this exercise, I put together the roster from Game 1 between the Edmonton Oilers and LA Kings for last year's playoffs, and the expected roster for the Oilers entering this year's playoffs. So let's begin by taking a look at the roster from Game 1 last year between the Edmonton Oilers and LA Kings. The top line featured Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Connor McDavid, and Zach Hyman. The second line, Evander Kane, Leon Draisaitl, and Kailer Yamamoto. The third line, Warren Foegele, Ryan McLeod, and Derek Ryan. And the fourth line, Matthias Janmark, Nick Bjugstad, and Klim Kostin. On defense, Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci, Matthias Ekholm and Evan Bouchard, and Brett Kulak and Vinny Desharnais, Stuart Skinner, and Jack Campbell were the goaltenders. And here's the expected roster for the Edmonton Oilers entering the playoffs this year. Once again, a top line of Nuge, McDavid, and Hyman. This time, a second line of Ryan McLeod, Leon Draisaitl, and Warren Foegele. A third line of Evander Kane, Adam Henrique, and Corey Perry. And a fourth line of Matthias Janmark, Sam Carrick, and Connor Brown. On defense, Matthias Ekholm and Evan Bouchard, Darnell Nurse, and Vinny Desharnais. And in the third pairing, Brett Kulak and Cody Ceci, Stuart Skinner, and Calvin Pickard will be our goaltenders. So let's start with line number 1. Obviously, a toss-up. It's exactly the same. Nuge, McDavid, and Hyman. Although I will say it's an upgrade this year because I think Nuge, McDavid, and Hyman have been an even more effective trio this season. So while it is exactly the same line from last year, I'm going to give this year's number 1 line a slight upgrade because they have been playing better this year, and I think they found some real magic playing together as a trio this season. And our first changes are on the second line, with Kane, Draisaitl, and Yamamoto being a trio last year, McLeod, Draisaitl, and Foegele the trio this year. McLeod, Draisaitl, and Foegele I am going to call an upgrade this year as well. I've never really felt that Evander Kane and Leon Draisaitl were strong together. There hasn't been that chemistry that you would have liked to have seen. I thought Evander Kane has always played better with Connor McDavid, but Kane hasn't been able to deliver consistently enough to remain with Connor McDavid, and Nuge, McDavid, Hyman is just such an effective trio. You want to keep those three together, so Kane and Draisaitl, I'm going to give that one a down mark, but Draisaitl and Yamamoto did always seem to have that chemistry. Sure, it did go dry from time to time, but for the most part, Draisaitl and Yamamoto were effective. Yamamoto did get some big goals for the Oilers last year in the playoffs, so as we look to the line this year, McLeod, Draisaitl, and Foegele, I think they've been more consistent over this year. They've been a more effective trio than I think Kane, Draisaitl, and Yamamoto were overall. So by a slight edge, I'm going to give this one to McLeod, Draisaitl, and Foegele, especially these last couple games that they've been paired back together again. They've looked really effective for me, and I think going into this year's playoffs, McLeod, Draisaitl, and Foegele, should they remain together as expected, I think will be ultimately a more effective trio for the Oilers than Kane, Draisaitl, and Yamamoto were. And we go to the third line. Last year, Warren Foegele, Ryan McLeod, and Derek Ryan. This year, expected Evander Kane, Adam Henrique, and Corey Perry. This one is no contest for me. I think Evander Kane, Adam Henrique, and Corey Perry will prove to be a far more effective trio for the Oilers. Derek Ryan may not even factor too much into this year's playoffs. Ryan McLeod, I think, has always been better on the wing for the Oilers. He's in a much better position to succeed on the second line, playing with Leon Draisaitl. Same with Warren Foegele. I think he's more effective on the right side for the Oilers. So Kane, Henrique, and Perry, although they haven't really had a chance to succeed as of yet, I think this line has the makings of something really effective. Today we did see Corey Perry swapped out with Connor Brown, but I think Connor Brown will end up on the fourth line or out of the lineup more, and Corey Perry will see more ice time come playoff time. So for me, this one is no contest. Kane, Henrique, and Perry, although it might be a little early to call it, I think will be the far more effective trio for the Oilers on the third line. Now, when it comes to the fourth line, I think last year's fourth line easily takes down this year's fourth line. Matthias Janmark, kind of a toss-up either way, but Nick Bjugstad was extremely effective for the Edmonton Oilers last year. Really wish they could have kept him for this run again this year. And Klim Kostin, also an effective playoff player for the Oilers, scored some big goals. So for me, last year's fourth line, Matthias Janmark, Nick Bjugstad, Klim Kostin, is the winner at this point, although Matthias Janmark, Sam Carrick, and Connor Brown could prove to be an effective fourth line this year, but for a side-to-side comparison, I think last year's fourth line wins out. Now on defense this year, we have the same 6 defensemen, but they are paired a little bit differently. Ekholm and Bouchard remain together. They never should have been split apart. They're the most effective when they are paired together. They've pretty much been the Oilers' number one pairing all season long now. I expect that to continue, and I think they still will continue to be the Oilers' most effective pairing. Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci had their issues last year. Darnell Nurse and Vinny Desharnais, as of today, are paired together. I'm still not totally sold on either pairing. I think overall you have to give Nurse and Ceci the benefit over Nurse and Desharnais at this point, although Nurse and Desharnais are pretty new to being together. I'm hoping I'm wrong on this one, but for pairing-wise right now, I'm going to go with Nurse and Ceci over Nurse and Desharnais, but Desharnais last year was in the third pairing. He has more experience behind him this year. Hopefully he proves me wrong, but for pairings-wise, I'm going to go with Nurse and Ceci. For the bottom pairing, I really liked Brett Kulak and Vinny Desharnais together. I would have kept them together. I would have liked to have seen the Oilers bring in another top 4 defenseman, but I get it. Ken Holland didn't want to mess with the chemistry. There was no clear upgrade over Cody Ceci available after Chris Tanev and Sean Walker came off the board, so he keeps the same 6 defensemen. We don't know yet if Troy Stetcher or Philip Broberg are going to become key components in this blue line come playoff time. That could very easily happen, but for right now, I'm going to prefer last year's D pairings to this year's, although I do like the pairing of Brett Kulak and Cody Ceci, so I don't know. This one's kind of a toss-up for me. Like I said, it's the same 6 defensemen, so it's kind of hard to judge. Love the Ekholm and Bouchard pairing. That remains the same from last year. I think I like Darnell Nurse, though, better with Cody Ceci. Brett Kulak better with Vinny Desharnais. I think I do overall like the D pairings better from last year, although those pairings didn't get us past Vegas, right? So maybe these new pairings will be the key to getting past the second round for the Oilers this year. And in goal, Stuart Skinner and Jack Campbell last year. This year, Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard. I think Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard are the better tandem by far this year. They've just delivered the goods all season long. Stuart Skinner struggled, but Calvin Pickard has pretty much been strong since coming up. Jack Campbell's been up and down, right? He was obviously down, but he's had a bit of a resurgence with the Bakersfield Condors, but Campbell's going to be coming into these playoffs in the number 3 spot for the Oilers. So I think at this point, with the way Skinner and Pickard have played, especially over the past few months, I'm going with them as my better tandem over Stuart Skinner and Jack Campbell, despite the fact that Jack Campbell did come in and deliver some strong performances for the Oilers in last year's playoffs. So overall, I prefer this year's top line to last year, this year's second line to last year, this year's third line to last year. Prefer the fourth line from last year to this year, so that's 3-1 for this year's lineup. D pairings, Ekholm and Bouchard I like better in the top pairing over Nurse and Ceci, so I'll give it 4-1 to this year. Ekholm and Bouchard, Nurse Desharnais. I like Ekholm and Bouchard in the second pairing from last year, so we'll make that 4-2. Third pairing, Kulak Desharnais, Kulak Ceci. I like Kulak Desharnais, so we'll go 4-3. And then goaltending, I prefer Skinner Pickard to Skinner Campbell from last year. So if we go by a point for each line and pairing, this year's roster wins it 5-3 for me. Well, those are my thoughts, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you prefer last year's roster, this year's roster? Let me know your thoughts. Thank you again to Makush for suggesting the topic. Great to look at, and yeah, interested to hear all of your thoughts in the comment section below. If this is your first visit to the channel and you like what you see, please consider liking and subscribing for all the latest Oilers content. You've been watching the Oilers Fanatic. Thanks for being a fan.